Meeting to order at January 29th Comprehensive Plan Task Force, which was rescheduled from the 22nd of January. And just quickly reviewing the agenda before I introduce the members and recap the January 10th meeting. We're going to talk about we were going to talk about working waterfront, but we're going to delay that because of some things that are happening at the state level. And instead, we might insert a statement, an opportunity to talk about affordable housing on a more personal level than what we normally see. We're going to then talk about new business.
6 o'clock.
Yeah,
We're going to focus on
I forget
a
something.
revised vision statement. I was hoping Dave was going to be here because he's the one that was going to be front and center in that. But I have some things that I can talk about if he doesn't show up. And we were hoping to vote on a final vision statement. Next, we're going to review the interior zone and some alternatives that we've discussed before. A very controversial and interesting discussion. And finally, we're going to talk about the land use plan and hopefully or possibly reach a vote or reach consensus on the final land use plan. We also are going to talk about the meetings moving forward. We have 2 meetings scheduled for February, but as I was corrected, I said, yeah, let's go and do February 14th and February 28th like scheduled. And obviously, brain dead me did not realize that the 14th was Valentine's Day, which might mean a lot to some people. And so we might want to take a look at maybe changing that date a little bit. And then we're going to talk about some outreach goals and objectives and then next steps. I want to finish by 7:30, and not so much me, but also we have people traveling from a long distance, and 234 hour, not 234, but 295 is a little bit kerfluffle, I understand, so we want to make sure. Hey, Dave, come on up here.
I got promoted?
Or Bob, yeah, either one.
No, you're in trouble. No, you misheard.
Okay, so that's the agenda. And I'd like to quickly go around the room just to introduce the task force members that are here, starting with
Brian Hurst.
Phil Taylor.
I'm Mark Ironman, the town planner.
and coming from the bowels of the earth is
Mary Ann Nate.
Marianne.
Kevin Johnson.
George Prince.
Matt Gilly.
Dave Brown.
I'm Al LeGros, the chair, and
Bob Eaton.
Bobby, thank you very much. All right, the last time we met, we had a lot of discussion about the interior zone and possible changes that we might want to make in terms of possibly ordinance changes. And the reason we focused so much on the interior zone last time was because it constitutes the bulk of the land area that we have in Harpswell, and there are differing perspectives on how that needs to be zoned and considered. Some people want to keep it as open as possible, big lots. We have 40,000 square foot lots, and then if it's a subdivision, it's 80,000 square foot lots. That butts up against some of the other concerns that the community has about affordable housing and maybe different ways to look at zoning those particular areas that would allow more flexibility in how we use those areas. We also talked about the vision statement, and hopefully Dave is ready to wax poetic on the vision statements and priorities. A lot has happened really in the last couple of weeks that could impact the comprehensive plan, most notably the storm damage that's taken place in the working waterfront, how we can sort of work that into something that makes sense going into the future. And then we talked last week about a basic plan to engage the community. We don't have a lot of time, folks. We need to settle on the nuts and bolts of this plan and then get it out to the rest of the community as expeditiously as possible. So we don't have a whole lot of time to do that. And if we want to get ready for something to bring forward to the town in May, it has to happen in the next few months. With that, George was going to talk a little bit about his meeting with Senator Collins regarding the damage in the working waterfront, but there's a lot going on. George, just say a couple of words about it.
Well, I'll say this, she was really receptive to the urgency, and I think there's proof of that. She showed up down here within a week to come see for herself, so. And she's got a plan ready to go. She's waiting on the governor right now, I believe. And she said her wording may need to be changed a little here or there to go along with whatever the governor decides to do. But she said other than that, it just needs to be signed. So she's completely on board with a relief package. My only thing, and I don't know as it pertains to this panel that much, but these people that lost their wharves or their businesses, they're going to need permitting. And the new wharfs may not look exactly like the old wharf, assuming maybe they're going to want them a couple feet higher now. Maybe they always wanted it 10 feet longer or 4 feet wider, or their fish house moved or something. I'm just in hopes that there's not a lot of red tape as long as they're not making drastic changes. I would certainly think that any new structure would probably have some type of improvement. I don't expect anybody to put back exactly what they had, but so that's just my 2 cents worth.
Okay, so, I mean, this was a huge wake-up call for a lot of people. I mean, we saw firsthand what folks like Mary Ann was bringing to light a while ago about what a 1.5 foot sea level rise would look like and the potential that storms would impact with that. And so what we need to think about as a comprehensive plan is looking forward for the next 10 years, 15 years, how can we blend with what the state is doing in terms of the working waterfront to make sure we give it, from the town's perspective, the appropriate attention that it deserves. So, we also have the opportunity to hear from a member of the Affordable Housing Working Group who wanted to, just a couple of minutes to talk about what she thought was an important thing to bring to our attention. And this I call Madame Snellings.
Hate these things. Hi. Hi. I have no desire, I'm Courtney Snellings on Affordable Housing Working Group. I have no desire to derail the working waterfront discussion at all. But just to put a human face on the affordable housing issue, which I think affects folks on the working waterfront as well. There's an app called Nextdoor. I don't know why they keep sending me stuff. I keep trying to get rid of them. But I got another one, and this is from a young woman who lives on the Neck, still in search of a rental. Please help. I have 3 kids. We got to be out in February. Landlord selling the rental. Help. I need a roof over my kid's head. I have great references and very clean. This person grew up on Bailey Island. I think her folks might still live there. She has a cleaning service in town. She's doing what she can to live here, to stay here. And I really wanted the opportunity, I just saw this, to put a human face on the problem. It's one thing to talk about single-family homes and cluster housing and where we're going to put it, et cetera. But this is a real person who needs help. And there are other people similar to her. I was at the doctor's today, the receptionist. We got to talking. Where you going? I live on the islands. I said, oh, really? Which one? Great Island. Oh, do you mind my asking you what your situation is? We live with my grandparents because we would not, excuse my back, folks, we would not be able to afford to live. We'll have to decide what we're going to do after that. But, you know, we read a lot about it, but these are real people with sometimes rather desperate problems. So I just wanted the opportunity to address you on that. I'm not making a report tonight or anything like that. It's just something to keep in mind. Thank you. I appreciate it, Al.
Thank you very much.
Heat went out.
All right.
Gina called me, I had to go over to the board, I'll fire it up.
I'd like to turn next to discussion about the vision statement. The last time we left it, there was some discussion about maybe changing priorities or maybe adjusting the wording and so on. And I know, Dave, you've been working on it. So why don't you tell us what your recommendations and perspectives are in terms of the vision statement?
So let me give you a brief summary of how we got to these statements. Basically, fairly early in this process, we had a vision meeting at the school, and about 100 people showed up. It turned out when we analyzed the data, it was typically 100 older people showed up. And among other things, they left behind pieces of paper with lots and lots of recommendations about what we should pay attention to. So the committee, which was me and Bob and Ron and Julie and Howard, I think that was those are the formal committee members, and then we co-opted some people who joined us in some of our meetings, which I think included Mary Ann and Alan. And we did two things. We did a content analysis of the responses to the vision meeting. We went through all the list of things that people said they wanted to see and counted how many there were for various topics. Identified, I think, 7 or 8 different themes and counted how many people voted for those themes. And then to respond in part to the fact that that was a biased sample of the community, we also did an online survey, which got another 100 people and another several hundred statements about what they wanted to see happen in the community. So we folded those into the initial set. And what you've been looking at for the last several months is, I think, 8 different. We decided not to try and prioritize them because they were all, as we said, priorities. And we didn't want to try and pick out one as being more important than the other, partly because we knew some people would agree with that and lots of other people wouldn't. And we didn't want to encourage a large fist fight over what should get the most highest numbering. So that's where these came from, and some of you were eager to make it a list only 3. And my response to that is I think that then says there are 5 or 6 themes that a lot of people were concerned about that we would be dropping as priorities. And I would prefer to keep a wide-ranging set of priorities that reflects the community's statements to us. I guess I continue to think they are all priorities, so I'm a little antsy about the idea of saying, well, they're all priorities, but some are more priority, have more priority than others. I think they all, at least in the eyes of some citizens, have high priority. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the editing you did and the thought
Well-
about making some of them highest priority.
Well, I think what I was trying to respond to was the criticism of the last comprehensive plan that didn't really focus on a small enough segment of issues to really make an impact, if you will. But having said that, I think my solution would be if we make it clear in the plan that these are not rank-ordered priorities, that these are all important issues that we need to deal with, and not look at, say, this is number one or this is number two. Because I know Matt sent an email to me a while ago, and given what's happened in the last month, one could argue that resiliency against climate change and impacts on the working waterfront might be more important than, let's say, potable water, which most people initially thought was, hey, well, that's a no-brainer because everybody has to pull water out of a well and stuff like that. So maybe the way to deal with this is to say, these are not rank order priorities, but these are all priorities that we think are important for the next 10 or 15 years, and deal with it that way. That gets away from saying, you know, potable water is more important than working waterfront or affordable housing or whatever the case might be. All of these are important, critical issues. Now, that's kind of where I am right now. What does everybody else think about that?
Now, I'm going to talk to something that be more into the weeds. I think just for visibility and making the people in town feel that they were heard, we should show the two items that deal directly with people. That would be the working waterfront, and also improving the availability of housing. To me, just optics are, if you are talking directly to people who are affected, you don't have to prioritize it, but it just highlights it. I also would change these from adverbs to verbs. I mean, this is really getting into the weeds, but I think it is stronger to say to sustain or to preserve rather than just saying preserve. I think by doing that, we also have to make this fit into the future land use plan. And I think it gives us a little more flexibility if we've sort of brought these to the focus, those two things.
What else?
I agree completely with what Mary Ann just said. I took the time and went through the responses, and those were the two biggest responses from everybody in the town too, was affordable housing and working waterfront. Those were the statements that showed up the most from the people in the town, so I think that would reflect what the people said too.
Yeah. And the others all have to do with this, but they all affect both of those two things.
I mean, nothing, all these things are kind of interlaced, interrelated in a lot of different ways, and so that's why it makes it difficult to say, this is number one or what number two.
Put them in a circle.
So in terms of organizing the plan, if we could make it clear that, you know, all of these are important priorities. We heard that based on inputs that we got from the community, the working waterfront, housing were important. Also, we got a lot of stuff on potable water. I mean, I personally talked to a lot of people that think water is a critical issue. And then I was just counseled by Kevin that he talked to a hydrologist.
The state hydrologist.
State hydrologist who thought that, oh, maybe this is not as much of an issue as you think it is in terms of Harpswell.
Oh, he flat out said it wasn't that big of an issue. He said your high-density areas, it could be a problem. You know, the south end of Orr's Island. So, and it's been a problem for my great-grandparents. But unless you get any type of heavy industry, sucking from these places. He goes, you don't have a problem. Which upset a lot of people, but,
Yeah, it is what it is.
Potable water was only mentioned twice in the responses that I read. That was it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, the ransom study that was in '08 said that there should not be any curtailment on development due to groundwater availability. But, so it seems like though the next step for that issue is to do a study, not necessarily to do something, like we need to do something probably for the working waterfront, we need to do something for affordable housing, but to me, the next step for potable water, groundwater, is to study it and see what comes of that.
And there is a recommendation that says that the ransom study should be updated. So you can use the same information you need to update getting the new well, the wells since 2003 or whatever the date was, and the septics, because really what the ransom study was looking at was the effect of septics on wells.
Right.
And the technology has changed considerably since that report was written, and which means, and that report, if you read through it, it was a formula that they used to calculate things. I suspect some of the parameters of that formula will have changed because of the changes in technology. And so having the engineer people who know what they're talking about to redo that kind of an analysis should give you a little bit better idea of where we stand now versus where we stood then. And so that recommendation is in there.
Okay. Bob?
I want to suck this back up to the high level of vision and not so much into the weeds of studies. I think that Mary Ann's point is a very good one. Most of the visions I've read about are in the Old Testament. The prophets didn't have a vision with 8 subparts. But I take the point that we had a meeting and we asked people what they thought, and now we sort of feel like we have to reflect this. That's fine. And the idea that I don't think you prioritize visions as such, because, it's not a work plan. The vision list is not a work plan. It isn't. It just isn't. On the other hand, I don't think any of us would agree as, we got 8. Let's just randomly select which one should come first, because it does matter which comes first. And Mary Ann's point is a totally valid one, and I think we need to talk about what's human. And water is an issue, but it's not a human. It doesn't have the issue that the working waterfront and housing does. So I think the order is important, and I'm not going to get into whether that's a priority or not. There will be an order, and people will look at what's first and what's last. It's inevitable. So we can claim it's not a priority, but it probably is. And I've thought about this a lot since reading Matt's email, and I think, quite frankly, just to sort of move the discussion along, what defines this community, what makes us feel good, is the working waterfront. And I think it ought to be working waterfront, housing, and then the rest of the order I'm less concerned about. But I would leave the technical issues to the bottom of the list and elevate as much as possible the more human issues. So scenic beauty or something is one of them, which seems sort of inconsequential. I think I might put that even above water, but after that. But the first 2 are important to me, and I would say working waterfront, housing.
Anything else? Any other comments? I would just make a point. I'm not trying to be contrarian, but I saw there was a chart that was in the information that we pulled together in this plan that talked about the population, the numbers of people in the town that are working in various areas. And if I'm not mistaken, the number of people working commercial fishing was 6%, something like that. And the largest chunk of people in Harpswell were people that commuted to Portland and Brunswick and other places for places like, jobs like medical and other related facility. So I just want to, I'm not saying that, I guess my point is we need to make sure that we're not tilting everything toward the fishing community, and that we take a holistic look at the town the way it is right now, recognizing that the fishing community has been an important part of what Harpswell's been all about for centuries, and is a part of the community that is in some ways an economic engine for what happens here. So I just want to make that point, and I agree with you. I think the way we rank order these things, whether we like it or not, sends a message to people that, hey, yeah, well, yeah, they talked about this up first, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to make it clear that maybe instead of vision priorities, we say vision elements, or vision something like that, rather than priorities, and make it clear in the text in our plan that these are not rank-ordered priorities. These are all important, and that you know, that all of them deserve attention in their own right. That's kind of where I am on this thing. And you know, I'm not sure. Do you? Go ahead, Mary Ann.
I was just going to say, just going back to the 6% that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know if that same report showed self-employed.
It didn't.
It
It didn't, which is a gap in the
And that
data.
is a gap in reporting.
Yeah.
Because the
So that
fishermen
might
are
be- it might be more,
self-employed.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Point well taken.
we do know that it is a very high revenue producing for the town.
Right.
And the other self-employed businesses, whether fishing or not, which are the cleaners in town and the people that Courtney referred to, are all having a problem living here.
Okay, so in terms of the, go ahead.
I think
Brian.
the other thing is that the town needs to do something about affordable housing and fishing. The people who commute, and I was one of them, all we need is a place to live. And, you know, as beautiful as it is, I mean, that's true. And then you drive off 20 miles or so to your where your job is. But the town does need to do something about the availability and viability of the working waterfront, and also about increasing affordable housing.
Availability and viability and sustainability, as we've seen.
Yeah.
That's become a huge issue, and it's, okay, so,
Alan, can I
Yes,
add to
I'm
this? One of the things I was thinking about with this is, how do we represent the whole community? How do we speak to ways that doesn't say this is one group that is more important than this other group, et cetera?
yeah.
So for me, the one that I would be inclined to put first is enhancing the sense of community by strengthening cooperation and volunteerism. That building a community that supports each other and that understands each other and empathizes with each other is more important, and to me at least, than any one of the focus things. The way we present this, I hope, says to people, we're talking about the community as a whole. We're not talking about some subset.
How does that strike everybody?
I don't feel that way. I feel that, I feel like we can say, as in the report, that there are many, many priorities for people in the town. But that we, as a group who have studied this, feel like certain ones are crucial over the next 10 or 15 years. some, you know, some are and some aren't. And I think the two that we've been talking about are crucial. And that it's, okay, maybe incumbent upon the committee to say that while acknowledging that there is a plethora of priorities for many people in town. So.
Bob?
I think the introductory paragraph is a very good paragraph, and it does much of what you were suggesting, David. And I would say, as this plan will be informed by the following concerns, or following, don't know what the right word of the noun is. Take out prioritizing. It's a misnomer for one thing. How many priorities can you have? I mean, come on. There's an issue here in the English language. So I would just take that entire subsection out. It's the vision statement. There's a beautiful paragraph talking about community and so on. And our work will be informed by the following concerns that have come from the public in our discussions. And just listening.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we haven't even talked about is our fire and EMS system in here. You're talking about priorities.
Right.
It's coming down the road. It's going one of the more expensive things that are coming in this town. You know, we spend, what, $400,000 a year for paramedic service, and the fire departments, you know, they need more all the time. The training, everything's getting expensive, but pretty soon, you know, I don't know if it'll be my lifetime, but there'll be, you know, full-time paid firefighters here. You know, Wars Allen's doing recruiting now, but I don't know how long.
Central Fire Station's on the,
That will commute in from Lisbon Falls.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That's where they get
They all are, except for two.
well, that's a good point, because especially in our community, it's an older community, and fire and rescue, EMS, and so on are important services. And, you know, we are facing, as a town, the potential for a pretty significant bill if they want to put in a central fire station off of Mountain Road here on town-owned land. I was talking to somebody at the crossroads of Harpswell's information center called the Recycling Center. And he told me, he said that he wouldn't be surprised if this was gonna be, you know, like $5 million to build a fire station in the land out in front of the recycling center, which is, for this town, a big bill. And so, you know, the potential for how to afford that in the future and how we deal with that is important.
Well, ironically, we interviewed two firms today, architects, and interviewing another firm tomorrow. We have three that are interested, that pretty much all they do is design public safety buildings.
Yeah.
There's the first $1 million right there with the architects.
Well, a third of it.
Okay, so, I mean, we were hoping tonight to sort of vote on a final version of this vision statement. And I think, you know, it might not be a bad thing to take Bob's recommendation. Say, we have the vision statement, that first. And it says, in Harpswell, we cherished our rural roots, which touches base with people that are concerned about maintaining rural character, a flourishing fishing community, remarkable natural resources that surround us. We are committed to being a community that is a welcoming place to raise children, which is a concern, because you know, children are, in terms of attending schools, are dropping off. That's a concern. So we need to be a welcoming place to raise children and enjoy life as older adults. The largest segment of Harpswell, the growing segment of Harpswell, is people basically over 60, 55, 60 years old. We have to face that reality, where businesses can thrive and everybody has access to the waterfront. So, I mean, that touches a lot of things, I think, that are important. And then, you know, we try to break down it follows with specific, what we called initially priorities, maybe
Concerns, vision
our
concerns,
vision
Did you say?
elements or aspects.
issues.
Do you want to, do you know what I'm talking about here, this list of things
Yeah,
that,
right there.
do you want to retain that, or do you just want to say, this is our vision statement, and then let the rest of our report kind of outline what we've sort of encapsulated in the vision, what was called vision priorities?
If Bob could remember what he said, as the next statement, I think that would be perfect,
Yeah.
and then we can,
Can you
we
play
can,
it
we can, yeah, no, I can't play that, unfortunately, go until tomorrow. Then, you know, we can list these, and just we said it, and we're not prioritizing, we still could, you know, keep the order and, or put it in a circle, I don't know, but.
Yeah.
but I-
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the bottom line is how we present this, how we organize it on the page and present it is gonna impact people. And whether we want to admit it or not, it's gonna convey information in a certain way. And so if we all as a group want to say, all of these things are important, and not necessarily, this is number one, this is number two, or whatever.
In no
If
specific
everybody
order.
is comfortable
What's
with
that?
that,
In
then
no
we
specific
need to
order.
sort of construct our plan to convey that as clearly as possible.
Got it.
Does everybody agree?
Is that a motion?
Well,
I second it.
I second it.
does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I'll
but-
call it
No,
up.
I'll speak against it, and
Okay.
then.
but It was your idea.
Oh, I think, just as an editorial thing, this is the opening page, and all of a sudden, we're saying, well, these really aren't priorities. I mean, we're beginning to rob the thing. The thing ought to be poetry. This, you know, the rest of the plan is a lot of details and stuff. This is poetry. And you don't do poetry and say, oh, by the way, this order, don't take this order seriously. But if people really want to put that in because it'll kind of feel better, that's okay. I just object to it as a writing exercise in the first
Well,
place.
every one of these elements has a constituency in the town. And so, getting back to Dave's point, we don't want to divide the town into little pockets of people that are saying, well, you know, my concerns are more important than your concerns and so on. I mean, all these things are important. So, I mean, to me, at this point, after looking at this for a couple of years now and thinking about it almost every night, go to bed, I think we need to say, all these things are important, and all these things are important enough that we need to focus our efforts in the next.
So currently in the plan, there's, in the part that says vision and priorities, we describe how we got to it. And then we say, the vision statement consists of a short statement outlining the aspirations of the community, followed by 8 priorities, which the community identified as the most important to focus on over the next 10 years. So, do you want to craft that sentence differently or to describe, I mean, I think that says that they're all, I can change the word priorities, I've already gotten that message, it's written down. But so if I were to come up with a better word than priorities, does that sentence say enough to say these following things are just the most important things that we came up with?
I think it does.
From the 200 people that we heard from?
Yeah, I think it does.
Would you like aspirations as an alternative word?
Of the 8 things,
Priorities,
aspirations?
Yeah, aspirations.
What do people think?
Aspiration's too fuzzy. I like concerns, because an issue is, well, a concern is something that people are really concerned about. So, but anyway, I think we should leave it to Judy to take this whole discussion and come up with.
Oh, no, we're not leaving this room till we vote on it.
All right, so we have a motion to To not present these vision priorities in a way that would give people a rank order, and present them in a way that makes the point that they're all important, and they're all important to the future of the town.
Do you feel like that statement does
I think it does.
that?
I think the vision
It's
statement
less wordy.
does. The vision statement certainly does, and if you want to go and say, here are some, elements of the vision statement or concerns or whatever, something like that, and then present this.
So, I just want to make sure that I get everything right. In what we wrote already for the vision priorities, so I just read the first sentence, well, it's the second paragraph, but you guys felt that that was good enough to say that these are all kind of equally important. After that, we wrote, the vision has been used to guide the development of the plan's goals and policies. In our discussion with the community, the 3 topics most often mentioned included protecting and enhancing the fishing community, creating more housing variety, and carefully considering the impacts on groundwater and the natural environment as a whole. Is that okay to leave in there? Because
I mean, I think that's a true statement.
pretty sure statistically it's true, but whether you want to write it that way or not, that's up to you guys.
How does everybody feel about it?
That sounds good.
I mean, I'm not sure we've wrapped our head around a recommendation yet, but I think,
So what I'm hearing is we don't need to change anything. That is what I'm hearing, except the word priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And then are we going to move the order so that we move the working waterfront and the housing to the top 2 and then reorder them, even though the order doesn't make any difference? We think,
But just so people see that
just so that
first.
people see that
I
first.
think it ought to be organized according to the last statement that you made.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Consistently throughout,
Yep. Okay.
okay?
Got it.
Juliet, I'm not looking at the list, but is
Yep.
one of the 8 items deal with water supply and groundwater?
Yes.
Yes.
It does not specifically say that. It says preserving the beauty and resilience of our waters, open space, and natural settings in the face of climate change by leading in sustainability and resilience initiatives.
So
that's a little side, that might be sidling up to water.
And there's
Okay,
one,
but I-
in
But not quite getting to it.
that sustains
What I
water
submitted
quality.
as a comment was
Step backwards.
preserving our potable water supply and natural resources.
Not my turn.
Preserving,
Oh, right, sorry. You're right now. I wrote the wrong one, didn't I? Hold on a
While you
second.
were
There's
doing it.
another one that says enabling residential growth that sustains water quality, transportation, and the environment while providing for the housing needs of our diverse community. So in there might be a better place to stick preserving potable. We can add to sustains water quality and groundwater availability.
I mean, I think all of our concerns and issues are here.
Yep.
I think that what we're telling you, and I think what we're all agreeing on, is that let's not get overly wrapped around the axle about this is number 1, this is number
Right.
2, and
Yeah.
this is number 3, because they're all important.
Yep.
But I also think that highlighting, as you said before, that we got more comments about these areas is something that ought to be brought out.
Yep. And that report that I sent out to everybody is also will be in the plan as an appendix. So anybody who wants to go look at the raw information we got can do so,
Okay, well,
if they really want to know that much.
Given those comments, does everybody feel comfortable with endorsing the vision statement with those changes?
Yes.
All right, I have a vote. All in favor? Okay, great. All right.
There we go.
We sorted that out. We go, there we go. We killed it.
Moving on.
I think the minute should reflect our thanks to David for pulling this off.
I'm glad I'm not taking them.
Okay, the next important item is a discussion about the interior zone and some alternatives. I mean, I know that we've seen a lot of emails that have come across about possible ways to modify our interior zone. You want to lead the discussion on this, Judy?
So at our last meeting, we went around the room, and everybody was okay with all the other zones except for the interior zone, which we still had further discussion on. And I said I would pull together what I heard as different alternatives to changing that to have different requirements. So everybody should have that, that sheet that I sent out. And so in that, I put what our current zoning is, and then what the future land use plan currently says in what we had written, and then 3 alternatives to that. One alternative, and then instead of just writing the alternatives, I tried to put some words, because I heard that sometimes when I write matrices, that they're hard to pay attention to. So I wrote words so that people would be able to understand them. So alternative 1 was maintaining the same minimum lot size as a single bedroom home, not in a subdivision, as is in your current zoning. And then, so that would be 40,000. So right now it says 30,000 square feet. This would be changing it to 40,000 square feet.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Could you state in each one of these discussions what the intent is?
Yes.
I'm more interested in the intent, because I get confused about the particulars of whether 40 or 20 or 50,000 square feet does
Right.
it, but I am interested in what the intent is.
Well, so in this case, because it's all one zone, the intent is to allow for different sizes of housing by making the ability to create smaller lots than can currently be created in the interior zone. We have already allowed that right now in the affordable housing zones and in the mixed use, thank you, Al, and in the mixed use areas. So this is allowing it in that whole interior zone, and in the other 2, we created a much smaller ability. So this is just a little bit smaller. So you can't do something really tiny, because 30,000 square feet is the smallest option that we have here, and that's for a 1-bedroom house. All of these are governed by the per bedroom idea. And so the idea of all of them is to allow for some variation in the size houses, because for developers and builders, the size of the lot impacts on the size of the house. There's just, those 2 things can't be separated. I mean, it's not that somebody can't have 10 acres and build a tiny house, but they generally don't. So, so the options are different numbers to achieve that goal. And really, I think each one is, I don't know that there's good, I'm gonna try to come up with good words for how this, some of it is allowing slightly smaller lot sizes than you currently allow. Some of them are keeping the same size, right? So alternative 1 and 3 both start with 40,000 square feet as the minimum, and then 15,000 square feet for each additional. So if you were to have a 3-bedroom house in those areas, you would get 85,000 square feet, which is 5,000 square feet more than you currently require for a single-family house in that zone. So if somebody wants to build a 3-bedroom house, they have to have an 85,000 square foot lot.
Judy, I think you had a question on that.
Oh,
Sorry, do you have
Yeah.
a copy of that memo, or?
you can have mine.
It definitely affects the Affordable Housing Committee, is what you're saying.
And you can give us advice on any on changes to that.
But that being said,
Yeah.
these are going to be in the comp plan. It doesn't mean later on down the road, we don't go before the planning board and the town and we change these things.
Right,
It's not written in stone here.
right. Just the fact that we say this seems reasonable to us doesn't mean it's law.
That is true.
Careful,
Careful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it is law.
Well, it's law in one sense, but the town.
It's law in the sense that the state law says
Trumpian.
that your zoning ordinance has to be consistent with what's in the comprehensive plan. If the comprehensive plan says you should have 8-acre lots in the interior zone and you only have 2-acre lots, and somebody comes in with a proposal to develop on 2-acre lots, and the neighbor happens to be a retired land use attorney and says, wait a minute, that's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, that is probably a situation where the town loses. And so be careful in that when you talk about the future land use plan, it is not, oh, we can change it. If you want to go to town meeting and amend the comprehensive plan, you can do that. But there has to be maybe not a hand-in-glove relationship between what's in the comprehensive plan and the zoning, but it's got to be pretty close, or there's a legal risk, and I have an obligation to sit here and tell you that.
In the old comp plan, it's 17 years ago now, weren't there a bunch of changes that were never implemented?
And they are all legal vulnerabilities, and I'm going to make a statement that maybe I will someday live to regret.
They're my favorite.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that is, the vision statement in some ways talks about change and not wanting change. And I would tell you that the number of situations that go through codes and planning that have a lawyer involved have increased dramatically.
Bob had his hand up first.
I was talking to Dave Chipman the other day, and we were speculating. I said, I've gotten confused messages at this meeting, and this question comes up. And there's the firm point of view that you've just expressed, which I think makes a lot of sense, quite frankly, or what the hell are we doing? On the other hand, people said, no, it's a guideline. It seems very clear. The old plan, Chipman pointed this out to me, the old plan had, I copied it down, growth districts or something.
Mm-hmm.
And a group got together and really worked hard on how do we do that. And they submitted it to town meeting, and the town said, oh, the hell with that. So the plan doesn't tell us what we have to do. There's nothing in this plan that it says we have to do something, if that is a good example. On the other hand, put something in this plan, and it can tell you, no, you can't change it. Now, if you want to go, in your example, and change the zoning from what the comprehensive plan does, you have to go back and change the plan. And that's a problem. So I think we just have to be very careful that we're not putting a straitjacket on the capacity of town task force and committees that are carry on, and the select board itself, that carry on the work of this town month by month in the next 10 years, that we put a straitjacket on them and to try to think about that. It's a good idea, but I don't want to go back to the town with it and revise the damn town plan, the comprehensive plan, before we can even think about it. So I just want to be careful that we keep this plan from being a straitjacket to future creativity.
I think the comment I was going to make, it would seem to me that the interior zone offers the most space to do something towards affordable housing. So, as I look at this, we're looking at bedrooms now. It would seem that we would want to not be more restrictive in the interior zone, but be looking at it more from the bedroom use, and where you have larger spaces that you can take advantage of some of the affordable housing opportunities. I don't know if that's making sense, so I can't get too the interior zone is the largest in the town. So it would seem to me that's where we should have the most ability to work in the changes we want to do.
Well, I think,
Al?
yes, go ahead.
Let me ask Judy a question, though, that's an important question. In the draft of the future land use plan, there are sections for the interior zone that are similar to this for what I'm going to call the basic lot size density requirement. There's also language about special treatment for attainable housing.
Yep.
When I looked at this, I assumed that the special treatment for attainable housing would continue to be part of these descriptions.
So I put in here, attainable housing. Under all scenarios, you could choose to allow an attainable housing bonus, which would allow for 7,500 square feet of land for each bedroom, but require clustering that set aside 50% of the lot as open space, which I think is what was in the plan as I read it. So, but in order to do that, you have to meet the requirements of attainable housing. That's not just for building any old housing.
Right.
You have to have all the requirements that are gonna come along with that. So under any of these scenarios, we can have that attainable housing, which you have now. You do currently have that. It's just that it's written in a way that makes it impossible for anybody to use it.
Yeah, I want to follow up that comment with a couple of statements. First of all, I've been doing some research. This is called Rural by Design by a man called Arendt. And actually, I was turned on to this by Amy, who's sick tonight, couldn't be here. And as I was reading through this, our current interior zone says we need 40,000 square feet for a lot, 80,000 square feet if it's in a subdivision. And so when you look at the subdivisions, for example, that we've approved over the last X number of years, they're basically big lots and a central road that goes through these big lots and has a turnaround and comes back. Very straightforward. The goal was, okay, how many 80,000 square foot lots can I fit into this chunk of land? And we have a road servicing all of the lots going basically through the middle. When I go through this, I say to myself, maybe what we need to do is be a lot more creative in terms of what we approve as a subdivision or whatever. There are ways, there are techniques, there are things that can be done to preserve the land in a way that makes development less intrusive, less obvious, but also allows the same number of housing units to be developed. And so I think just as much as we want to have numbers and so on, we need to look in the way we approve future subdivisions and plans and demand that there be some sort of, creativity that fits with the values that we have in the town of Harpswell.
Now, we do have a flexible lot subdivision on the books right now, and it was designed around Randall Arndt's ideas.
That's the,
Flexible lot subdivision.
where is that?
It's in your current zoning.
It's in your current zoning.
It's in the subdivision ordinance. Actually, when it was developed, Randall and I developed it. The man who wrote the book, Randall lives in Brunswick now, and is a Mainer. and the flexible lot size provisions that are in the subdivision ordinance reflect exactly what's in that book. Now, why is it not used? There are two answers to that.
Yep.
The town makes it an option. You can either get approval of a subdivision for what are called 80,000 square foot lot subdivision, where all of the land gets put in, or most of the land gets put into lots and roads. Brian lives next to one of them. There is some common open space in that involves a wetland and some areas for stormwater mitigation that are required to be maintained as wooded, but most of the area goes into that. Of the 4 subdivisions that have been approved in the last 7 years, 8 years, one of them is a cluster subdivision, and 3 of them are 80,000 square foot because it's an option for the developer which way they want to go. The ordinance calls for me to beat them with a stick when they come in for their pre-application conference, and the story is the same. The real estate agent I'm working with tells me what people want in Harpswell are big lots. And so I don't want any of these little 30 or 40,000 square foot lots. I want 2-acre, 3-acre lots. It is an option whether you do 80,000 square feet or flexible lot size cluster. It was called that because the proponent of it, Burr Taylor, felt that cluster had a bad name in Harpswell, and that if you called it cluster, people wouldn't vote for it. It was added to the ordinance, and that was made optional because people thought if you said you have to do cluster development, they wouldn't vote for it. And so that was a compromise that was made at the time the flexible lot size provision was put in.
So if you see in the list here, right now, we just don't have a change from the current, so you could still do the flexible size under the future land use plan and alternative 1. Under alternative 2, that was the change that I made, which was requiring the clustering. So, I mean, that's a way to force that to be used and say, I don't care that the real estate person said everybody wants big lots, you can't have them, like, too bad. So that would allow, so alternative 2 would still have the same, provisions of, 30,000 square feet if you're building a single bedroom house, 45,000 if it's a 2-bedroom, 60,000, 75,000, right? Those are the, I think that's right, 55 and 70, sorry. And then you could have smaller lot sizes, but you have to preserve 50% of the land as open space, and then the units derive from the remaining developable land. And in that case, you can have a variety, right? Like you could have if you don't have enough land to do 6 lots at 75,000 square feet, maybe you put in 2 1-bedroom houses because you got enough room for those. So that would allow that through the entire interiors on alternative 2. Alternative 3 says that we'll create some overlay districts where it is most appropriate to have clustering. Not saying where that is. We're just throwing it out there that somebody would come along and make up where these overlay districts would go, and those would be the places where you could do, where you would have to do cluster subdivisions. So that's the difference between 2 and 3. And then if in 3, it's kind of makes really big lot sizes if you're not going to use clustering.
Okay, Mark, you worked with Randall Orange.
That's correct. Randall and I
I
have,
have not seen, in the time I've been on the planning board, a whole lot of creativity when it comes to approving subdivisions. It's basically, we have this chunk of land, we divide it up into a bunch of lots, and thank you very much.
and they have that option, and we go through.
So I guess maybe, are we missing something here? Why would we, if we didn't have it as an option, and we demanded that the future development adhere to certain benchmark requirements, like conservation and things like that, and we hold them to a higher standard than what we're currently seeing coming into the town, do you think that would make a difference, or do you think, I guess what I'm asking you is, as we look to the future here, where should we apply an effort to make affordable housing and so on compatible with the other segment of the town who says, we don't want all these small types of buildings, we want, you know, big lots and big houses and so on and so forth? How do we bridge that gap in terms of our ordinances?
Okay, here are 3 observations. One is that if you look at alternative 3, Judy has constructed an interesting alternative which creates, I'm going to call it, a market incentive rather than a regulatory incentive to do cluster open space development. It says if you're going to do a subdivision and you're not going to cluster, you got to have fewer units than if you cluster. Current rules say it's essentially 1 for 1. If you can do 10 units on the property at 80,000 square foot, you can do 10 units on smaller lots with common open space. If I understand 3 correctly, the intention of 3 is to say, if you're going to do a subdivision and you're going to just hack the land up into lots, you're going to get a significantly less units than if you do cluster subdivision. That avoids the you gotta do it. I caution that on number 2, in that when Judy ran the numbers about new building permits over the last 10 years, 65, 68% of those were non-subdivision lots, if I remember the percentage right. And the reason for that is, I think, because of the dichotomy between 80,000 and 40,000 square feet, people work very hard to find ways that they can create lots without creating a subdivision. They go to astronomical efforts of changing deeds and handing property to their dead grandmother and all sorts of things. Whether that will change if you change the arrangement, I don't know.
Right. I would say alternatives 2 and 3 are both meant to incentivize, well, 2 requires.
2 requires.
Subdivision development that is clustered as Randall Errant, and then you'll make a set of rules that fit that, but, or use the ones you have. But, you know, the point is that it's reversing it back. So lots outside of a subdivision have to be a little bit bigger. Lots in a subdivision are smaller.
As an incentive to
but
do.
they can only develop 50% of the land. So overall, maybe not really smaller, right? Because you could double the size of each lot to come up with what the total lot size is. But the
Right.
lots themselves become smaller.
And I think the third factor, and it's a very important factor, and I don't know how you deal with it, is that you make more money selling $800,000 homes than you do selling $600,000 homes than you do $4,000 homes. I'll tell you a personal experience. We bought a condo in Topsom 5 years ago and said to the developer, we'd like you to put a ceiling fan in this room. The developer said that'll be $200. A month later, I called the electrician who worked for the developer and said, oh, hey, I'd like to put a ceiling fan in the sun porch. How much would it be? $70. It's like the car sales business. You make your money. You make your money in the trade-ups. True, Bob? Bob, the developer?
I like to give it one way and be done.
But so the real dilemma, in a way, is that the people who want to buy homes want to buy big homes, probably on big lots, and whether the town can do anything to turn that ship even a little bit, to me is a really tough.
It's a hard question, and it's hard in every town.
Right.
I think one of the things that might, when I was designing these things and, trying to pull in what everybody was saying, you're probably not going to get an entire subdivision of one-bedroom houses. I have trouble imagining anybody's going to build that. But I do think that if you allow for slightly smaller sizes, most subdivisions have land that they can't quite use, right? Like, they might have an extra piece that might fit into the one-bedroom house size. So then, or a two-bedroom house size, right? And so then, better than just getting rid of that land, I mean, yes, you're not going to make money on building a whole subdivision of those, but maybe you build one or two in a subdivision. You allow that to happen.
Okay, so from the standpoint of the comprehensive plan, we're not going to solve the problem.
What's the problem?
But I'm trying to think of a way we can recommend that the town explore a series of options, whether they come out of the Affordable Housing Committee or whatever.
Well, I put those in a separate category.
And that's why I put it separate.
All right.
Right, but let me go back. There is an important thing on Judy's list, and that is 65% of the houses that have been built in the last 10 years have been built on lots that are smaller of any of the options here for non-subdivision lots. This increases the lot size for a typical 3 or 4 bedroom home.
What is this? This proposal, which one? One,
The
two, or
options.
three?
All of them.
All of them.
All the options.
Because if you start currently, if you have a lot that's not in a subdivision, 2/3 of the homes have been built on lots that are about 40,000 square feet. 50,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet. If you do the math and you want to build a 3-bedroom house under the current future land use plan, it requires 60,000 square feet. A 4-bedroom house requires 75,000 square feet. Alternative 1, we now have for a 3-bedroom house, we have 70,000 square feet versus 40,000. We have under alternative 2, we have 60,000, and under alternative 3, we now have 70,000. I'm not sure, that now we're back to this subdivision lot size and how we fit together, but there are not a lot of good places, I don't think, for somebody to buy 50 acres of developable land in Harpswell to do a 15-lot subdivision.
Yeah, those days are gone.
I can think of one.
Which is?
The Robinson property off of Mountain Road.
Some people would say it's a big piece of property that's probably 2/3 or 3/4 wetland.
And resource protected.
You got an arm up over
Yeah,
here.
there's somebody
Very
over here who wants
patient,
to.
but Mary Ann's gonna want you to come over here,
So, Bob Goodrow with Affordable Housing Committee. I would say this document and the alternatives are not bad. Now, I will tell you, I thought it infringed on attainable housing when I first read it. Only because we've had the, and I'm not sure I'm being politically correct when I say that the McMansion subdivisions done, but most of those are within the shore, have a certain piece of shoreland attached. Those are becoming less and less. And the next viable lot situation are more ledge, more wetlands, and not cohesive land grab that you can put 80,000 square. So this actually does obtain other housing beyond attainable housing, but attainable, I was looking selfishly for attainable housing because we're after the cluster and after the 50% set aside. There's some goodwill in this.
Same thing.
Don't take this lightly. Thank you.
It's not going to be affordable.
That was my next question.
It's going to be, you know,
question
what we're
is,
thinking, like 250,
I read
300,000,
the
something like that,
Affordable Housing Working Group
Altogether.
altogether,
November report revised in December.
on town-owned property.
Yes.
We find a developer, we give them the
It's a
land,
very compelling document.
along with the rules.
My
Kind of like
question, I guess,
Hamilton
is
Places like that. You know who that is?
I do, it's right across from my house.
I got the
Right across the street
from
Affordable
my house.
Housing
It is,
Working
yeah.
Group document, and I
That
got
worked out real
our
well.
plan.
Nice little home.
Yes, that's a good example.
That's what we get money.
But it's an important part of it. How do these two
Wow.
things fold together?
Smaller
or do
lot
they
sizes
not?
to make it more affordable to buy them.
So we have
There's
been
no such thing as affordable.
trying to make sure that what we
No,
put in the
but-
future land use plan
Are you gonna make
does
it
not
10?
preclude anything that's in the
Maybe
affordable
some rental
housing
property,
plan.
you know?
And tries to enhance it, which is why I put in the attainable housing
On the second page.
on the
So
second
that's
page. So that could be in any of the, in any zone, and we put that in, and we've written up we followed well, we said we were going to, the two different attainable housing, zones that we created, and they're gonna be slightly different, and we're just waiting, at least Mark told me that. And so we're just waiting for the details on that. So we are making sure that they match, and the affordable housing plan, when it's completed, is gonna be added. I assume it's gonna be completed before this goes to the May meeting. So it will be added into the comp plan, and so when you vote for the comp plan, you will be also voting for the attainable housing report. That's how it's.
I truly believe you're at the end of the line on big subdivisions coming your way. And that even though brokerage says this is what you ought to be buying, they're gonna have to make accommodations to the next series of buyers because you can't have what you used to get. Yes, it makes it even more expensive, but we're only so much more land left. And truly, for attainable housing, the inland zone is really our only applicable land under zoning laws currently that we're going to be able to make an impact if this has legs with the building community or development community.
To be clear, but the working group's proposals don't refer to the inland zone, they refer to these little yellow splotches you showed.
That's
us.
one of their proposals, is to have the town-owned land that could possibly be converted.
But there's a workforce housing
Yeah.
ordinance in the planning board's agenda or abilities right now. We're making that easier to understand in the future. That's what the attainable housing, affordable housing group has tried to do, is make that more legitimate so that builders and developers would look at this without ruining our water quality and allowing our fishing community, our service people to live in Harpswell versus reading stories, as Courtney brought forward, of, I'm a cleaner, I don't have anywhere to go.
This will be my last question. But it seems to me, if I understand correctly your strategies, you're taking a somewhat different approach than what was in Judy's recommendations. And the question is, I then came to believe, through no evidence in the writing, I think, but I came to convince myself that, oh, you're talking about the town-owned land here, and rather discrete zones. That would then, but I think now there's a territorial thing in terms of, are you both talking, are these two approaches on the same land?
Yes, no.
Sorry.
Well,
I would-
There are the two areas. And then
There's
also
the
this
two areas,
division.
and there's the whole interior zone. The interior zone currently has this workforce housing. You can today do workforce housing.
Anywhere
It's
in the
so
interior.
complicated that it's been used once in 15 or 20 years.
no, actually, the development was before the current.
Okay, so it's never been used. So you have it, it's never been used. So the workforce housing group has been trying to simplify that into a way that developers might actually use it. We are saying you should implement that in the
interior zone.
in the interior zone, no matter which of these alternatives you take for any other part of the interior zone. All of this has nothing to do with attainable housing. You would then add to it that,
Those two locations are off of Doughty Point, and the other one is Mitchell Field.
yeah, and that's those are totally separate, and they will have their own regulations.
But
Okay.
the affordable housing bonus applies to the whole interior zone.
Right. Okay, so, great discussion.
Sorry,
We're gonna leave here in 5 minutes.
wait. There's one other important part to this.
Make it 10 minutes.
Okay, sure, you're done.
I look at Bob as Bob the builder, developer, built, operates affordable housing throughout southern Maine. He made a comment a meeting or two ago that said, I think the thing that we should key on is duplexes, two families side by side. He said that because Maine State Fire codes require any building with 3 or more units to have a sprinkler system. No public water. Very unlikely that somebody's going to build a 20-unit. Maybe if, there's philanthropy or something involved. But if you drive around southern Maine, you will see a sizable number, both in clusters of duplexes and also individuals, that the way the affordable housing report is written is if part of those are tied up as long-term affordable housing, you can have one density. But even if they're not, you can have a little bit lower, need more lot area. I think the one thing that I looked at Judy's table is that in every one of these situations, it makes having a side-by-side, 2-unit, 2-bedroom duplex have more land area than a 4-bedroom home. I would suggest that we think about ways to, within reason, even if they're not affordable housing, to allow somebody to develop duplexes at a reasonable density. And if you think about the footprint of 2 side-by-side, 2-story duplexes is probably smaller than most of the single-family homes that are being built. The impervious surface is probably less than what the single-family homes are being. The water use is probably about similar. And so we have made it very difficult for anybody either to convert an existing property into a 2-unit, somebody who's got grandma's house, and now what are we gonna do with the 4 or 5 bedroom house that's on a 30,000 square foot lot? You're gonna try and find a buyer, probably somebody who wants to Airbnb it, for that big house. And so I think finding ways to, incentivize is not really it, but to provide ways that somebody who wants to may be able to build a 2-unit, do something. And currently, the numbers that Judy has put together create a disadvantage for 2 units, for duplexes.
They got a qualifier here. I'm a market. I am not an affordable housing guy. I do a lot, but I'm a market rate kind of a contractor.
Sorry.
I don't want to be, I try to do all I can, but I am a market rate guy.
All right. So, as reluctant as I am to say this, I think we need to think about this and get some clarification before we're ready as a task force to approve it, lock, stock, and barrel.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
Do people want to require clustering in the interior zone for any subdivision that anybody might build? Because I can take out some options then if we narrow it down a little bit.
Well, I know a lot of people that would be adamantly against that.
Against requiring clustering?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even if it means that we're preserving 50% of the land.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest thing we have going for us for preservation of our water quality and our natural resources here in this.
Allowing clustering?
It's called that 50% set aside.
Yeah.
If you think you start putting some acreages that you drive down the center road, 50 acres, and all of a sudden you put 2 deer yards together so that they're not going to be functionally, blocked or inhabited in the future, and the housing is this way or closest to the road, those are huge, accomplishments for your future growth of Harpswell, in that's set aside. It is probably, and I'm sorry, I know every broker is gonna come shoot me, but this is where we're headed.
Any thoughts, comments from the group here?
I think it should be made, we should have more restrictions and have it be necessary. Only because even the values that we have in our vision statement are enhanced by cluster subdivisions. For those of you who are really not familiar with it, it's basically allowing you in a subdivision to have a lot of unnatural land, which is a plus in the value of your property. And I believe in Brunswick, there's a number that back into some public land, that was the selling point they used when they were selling that subdivision, is that it's in an area with a lot of natural area.
And Falmouth doesn't allow any subdivisions except clustered subdivisions. They're not the only town. There are a lot of towns that only allow cluster subdivisions. They don't allow any other kind.
So if you put these clusters out near the road, say you got a big lot, right, and you preserved all this land in the back, what's to stop, say 50 years from now, changing the ordinance or changing something and saying, okay, so we got this land that was preserved, now let's put another cluster out here. What's
So the
gonna stop
open
that from
space-
happening?
So the open space
Because,
has to be.
so then you really didn't do
permanently-
anything.
Yeah, so the open space has to be permanently, and I will put in parentheses permanently, because I don't know that anything is actually permanent, but it's not just that you create the open space and nobody, it is either given to the town, to the land trust. Sometimes a homeowners association owns it, but most of the time it gets transferred over. And you can write the ordinance however you want it to be, but the idea being that that open space loses all of its development potential. That stick is taken out, and you can't do it anymore. Now, I'm not gonna say that
Don't see
somebody
it happening.
could
I see
never get a
down the
lawyer to
ro-
squirrel
yeah.
their way out of that, but for the most part, it's as permanent as any of the open space you have in town.
Down the road, it's gonna be, well, we don't have any land left, we have to use this.
Could be.
So,
But many of those properties.
We won't be here.
Have
we
conservation
won't be, but
easements.
someone will be. So,
There's conservation easements on the open space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it would be fairly well protected. I think it would take a very strong change in people's perceptions. The other thing that's true is the way the roads get built and the way the houses get put in and the way the utilities get put in, it's unlikely that it will be easy to just convert that. First of all, a lot of that land is gonna be, because what you wanna protect is habitat, right? So it's wetlands and streams and, you know, it's pathways and things that where you're not necessarily gonna put a house to start with. And then expanding that out to some of the other land, but that's what's running through it. You know, so if you look at like this example, you know, there'd be a stream there, and then you're preserving a lot around it, you know, and so it would be difficult for somebody to say, now I'm going to build a road right up that stream. I mean, I can't promise that nobody ever will, but most of the time, at least currently, the belief is that conservation easements are you can pretty much call that permanently protected. That's as close as I can get to a certainty, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, the phrase "in perpetuity" is red meat to sharp lawyers.
Exactly.
And we should just have a certain sense of, yeah, we do the best we can. And I think you're
Yes.
right, you can load the dice, but at the end of the day, they're
The
sharp
town has to
lawyers.
agree that that's what they still
Somebody's
want.
willing to pay for those lawyers.
Yeah.
The
All
point
right.
is to make it expensive.
So I guess,
Let's try to wrap this up. We got partially through the agenda, we made some progress. I want,
we have to decide,
What?
go on.
you want to decide on the final future land use plan?
No, I don't think you're ready to do that.
I don't think so
I
either.
thought you said.
So we're gonna skip that. And I want everybody to think about our discussion tonight.
But we do have to decide about February 14th.
Exactly.
Tonight.
We have a meeting scheduled for February 14th, which is
Is that a Wednesday?
Valentine's Day.
It is also Ash Wednesday for anybody. for whom that
Okay,
makes a
so,
difference.
do people want to meet on February 14th, or do we want to look at a different date?
Ask my wife.
Let's try to look for an alternative date, and we'll try to get that out as soon as possible. We have a meeting scheduled February 28th. There's a handout here that talks about the schedule, and
So some of this is set in stone in this schedule, and some of it, I'm trying to get you to put things on a calendar.
yeah.
So, like I said, February 16th, letters to the editor. You said you wanted to get letters to the editor, to the Harpswell Anchor. If you want the March issue to have those letters in them, they have to be submitted by February 16th. So pretty much you gotta do that.
Right.
Somebody needs to.
Huh? I think the 17th is the date.
anymore.
Not anymore? All right. 15th, Mary Ann says.
You can check, but I
Do it
think so.
sooner.
We have a volunteer.
Yeah, you probably have a couple people volunteer to write those letters. Somebody needs to talk to to the Land Trust about doing an article
Yes, I'll
for
do that.
them, for their newsletter. So then we'll meet and we'll get through the rest of the plan. We will revise the draft, given all the comments that we've gotten so far, and we will get that back to you We can do it by February 9th if we want, and then you'll have it for that next week if we can find a time that's not the 14th to meet. And then the February 28th will be our last meeting before March 6th, which is also a Wednesday night. That's the latest you can vote to approve the plan for the public hearing. So you can't do it any later than that. You could do it at the 28th, at the meeting on the 28th. You don't have to have a separate meeting for it. But by February 28th, or by March 6th, sorry, you have to be ready to vote one way or the other. Because March 8th, the notice has to go out and the draft plan has to be available. And then for March 9th, we have to have handouts for the town meeting. We'll work on creating that. And then I put all these dates in here, March, public information sessions about the plan. My suggestion is that people from the committee go to different libraries or community buildings, and that it's advertised, and that you're there to answer questions about the draft plan. You can ignore that advice. But you gotta put the dates down, like, and then also, whatever you need to do between now and sometime in March, if you wanna do another TV information session, that's gonna need to be done and organized sometime in February, would be my guess, so that it can be aired in March. And then April 10th will be the public hearing, April 24th, a second hearing if we need one. Otherwise, then the task force votes to send the draft plan to the select board. April 25th, select board signs the warrant for the May 11th meeting. April 20th, mailer with warrant and summaries. May 11th, town meeting. That is the schedule going forward.
Okay.
Marching orders. But people have got to fill in, like, if you guys, you came up with a plan of what you wanted to do for public engagement, and time is very short and tight, so people are gonna have to say, I will do one on this date in this place, and, you can do it here, you can do it at a library, you can do it, I don't care where you do it, but I do think you probably really wanna have some time when there are people from the committee there to answer questions for people that, that once they have the draft plan, that you're there to answer questions, and so you might need places to do that. That would be my suggestion.
Are you looking for us to arrange the place as well?
Okay, so, just to wrap up, it is an aggressive schedule, and we'll get back to you with dates in terms of public information sessions as soon as possible. I'd like somebody to volunteer to write a letter that can be published in the Harpswell Anchor. My suggestion would be we put the vision statement, it's been in there consistently throughout many, many months. Vision statement, and then maybe, I'll talk to Judy. I'll write it. Okay. I'll do the Anchor article.
That took a while.
And I'll make sure it gets in before the middle of the month so that we can get it in on time. Anything else that we need to?
Just wanted to make sure everybody had those dates in their minds.
Okay, I appreciate that. Anything else that we need to discuss before we break tonight?
Can we send out the dates?
Yes. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for coming, and it's been a great discussion. This is important stuff. We want to make sure we get it right. And thanks for everybody for participating.